So this morning we're going to be talking about planning social media campaigns, and as kind of a roadmap, we'll start out talking about some of the major social media platforms and who among your audience you might find there. We'll talk a little bit about paid ads, and then we'll move into the planning portion. So working with this idea of a content calendar and what sorts of tools you can use to build and maintain one. All right, so if you're here, you probably already know that social media is an important means of reaching audiences, both current memberships of your association and potential future members. But just a couple of fast facts to underline the message. YouTube is the second most visited website by traffic. It's kind of the second search engine, if you will, after Google. We're not going to talk a whole lot about video today, but if you have video assets in your wheelhouse that you want to be sharing with the world, that's definitely something to consider. Facebook is the third most visited website by traffic, which also makes sense since it's one of the original social networks. So it's had a lot of time to accrue users. Instagram isn't too far behind though. It still will appear on the first page of results when you pull up just Google. If you just pull up a blank Google search. And then 25% of donors, according to this survey by the 2018 Global NGO Technology Report, 25% of donors say that social media often inspires them to give. So who is where on these platforms? Let's start with Facebook, since that is kind of the original gangster of social media. Almost 3 billion users per month will sign into Facebook. And about 68% of American adults are on the platform. The demographic is a fairly even breakdown. The numbers vary all the time depending on when people are surveyed, but a little more male skewed, but not by much. And the types of people you might reach here, I will mention that the biggest demographic by age still is a little on the younger side. The largest segment of users, about 30% of people on Facebook are between the ages of 25 and 34, so kind of that older millennial crowd. But senior citizens are a quickly growing demographic, so there's a lot of different age groups you can reach through this platform. Who can you find here? Event attendees, people who want to come to your in-person events, and if you want to do virtual events, it's a great platform to use for that. Especially in the last couple of years, I think Facebook events have really taken off. Technically, they're one of the older Facebook features. Facebook events started as a thing in 2005. I think mainly as a way of organizing in-person events, getting people out to in-person events. But they added on functionality called Facebook Live in 2015, which is kind of like what we're doing now. It's kind of like a Zoom medium to live stream or share recordings. But it might be more convenient for a lot of folks since they don't have to open up a separate platform like Zoom or like Skype. It's already built into Facebook. So if you're like a lot of people and just kind of have a browser window open to Facebook all day, you can get the event right through that. And Facebook is also good at providing little notifications of you have an event in an hour to kind of remind you if you've RSVP'd as interested or attending. You might also consider local folks. And by that, I particularly mean people who are in Facebook groups. So Facebook groups started as a function of Facebook in 2010. I've heard it described as the new modern day AOL chat room, which I thought was pretty interesting, but pretty accurate. These groups are created around a number of different interests. So it might be a local interest, like a neighborhood association kind of virtual group. A lot of them are created around specific interests or hobbies. So just as an example, some of the groups I'm in, I happen to collect houseplants. So I'm in a couple of local houseplant groups where people can trade houseplants and list houseplants for sale and that kind of thing. And, you know, even though it's kind of more casual social media platform compared to something like LinkedIn, you can find a lot of professional folks on Facebook groups too. So back when I was working in public libraries, I was in a number of professionally oriented library groups that would exchange ideas and tell each other about successes and less than successes they had with programs, that kind of thing. And then another thing to think about is who is kind of the next level outside of your immediate membership that might be interested in what your association is doing. So especially thinking about families and friends of people who work for your association or who are families and friends of your members. And it's really easy to ask your members or your employees to just occasionally share content that you post with their timeline. So, you know, if you have an event coming up, if you have an annual fundraiser or annual gala or something like that coming up, just encouraging folks to hit that share button. It's super easy. All right, so let's talk about Twitter quick. Twitter has been around since 2006, so not quite as old as Facebook, but pretty long time. It is a more heavily male-skewed demographic, with about 70% of users being male. 22% of American adults are on Twitter, so again, a smaller proportion than Facebook, but nothing to sneeze at. And it is also typically a younger crowd that's on Twitter, largest segment by age, being in that 25 to 34 range. So who's here? There's a lot of interesting statistics about Twitter. I mean, it gets kind of a reputation sometimes as being sort of a site where everybody's yelling at each other, especially if there's something political going on in the country. But a majority of people on Twitter are college graduates and have higher education degrees. So there are some serious folks on here too who are interested in discussing things within their field. Marketing folks, of course, are on Twitter, but just thinking about it, with my background in performing arts, there are a lot of folks who do like musicology or music research who are on Twitter and sharing with each other all the time. Twitter is also a great place for social sharing. Like how Facebook has that little share button, with Twitter, it's super easy to hit retweet. So it's a great place to encourage people to, again, retweet or quote tweet things that you're saying. And it's also a place where people like to discuss current events, often in real tweet time. If you've ever heard the term live tweeting, some people will live tweet events like the Oscars or a movie that they're watching. And then also, you know, people might be live tweeting like events as they happen, you know, holiday parades, for example. So the way that people do this typically is through hashtags. So just a quick look at hashtags in case you're less familiar with what they are. They're actually a pretty old phenomenon in themselves, in that they were first proposed by a Twitter user in 2007 and were, you know, was pretty quickly picked up later that year in the spreading news about a fire that had broken out in San Diego County, California. By 2009, Twitter adopted it officially and added the functionality where if you click on a hashtag in a tweet, it'll hyperlink to other tweets bearing that hashtag. So it's the way I think of hashtagging is kind of a way of organizing or almost cataloging, if you will, in the style of a library or you know, some other archive of organizing things by topic. Of course, it's a live version of that. It's not static, which makes it even more interesting for, you know, people looking for current events or recent news. Twitter further kind of embedded it into their culture with the trending topics idea. So if you see on the right-hand side here, when you log onto Twitter, it will often have this trending bar that you click on and just see what is trending where in the different countries or in your area or in different topics. And so it's used for everything from political issues and protests, thinking about like the Arab Spring protests a few years back and then Black Lives Matter. And of course, there's pop culture uses like March Madness, Tiger King when that was back a year or two ago. And then just all-purpose, useful for every time of year. Things like Follow Friday, Motivation Monday, Throwback Thursday. And so what do hashtags have for you that you can use? You can actually do a little bit of hashtag research. Kind of like if you're familiar with the idea of doing keyword research for figuring out what are the best words to incorporate in your website or your blog to lead people there when they type a search term into Google. You can do that with hashtags too. You've got services like Hashtagify, where you can see what's trending now. And you can also just do research within Twitter itself to see what's trending. And the fun thing about doing research is you can really dial in and see specifically what is the best terms to use for what you're trying to convey. So I follow a lot of accounts that have to do with vintage fashion, especially people who kind of do thrifting or secondhand buying and then sell them on online through Instagram or Twitter, so that other people who aren't in that geographic area can kind of have access to those fun things. So there are a ton of different hashtags just within that one segment that have to do with vintage fashion or just plain old vintage or vintage shopping. So it's interesting to kind of search through the different related hashtags to see what exactly will fit the message you're trying to send out. So Instagram, hashtags are also important here. That's why I'm kind of including it right after Twitter. Instagram used to traditionally be considered more of a female-oriented site, but in recent years it has become more of an even breakdown between folks who identify as female and male using the site. It is also a demographic that skews a little younger, with a majority of users being between the ages of 18 and 34. And then who's here? So it's a visually focused app. Most of the content is going to be either photographs or videos or photograph carousels or picture carousels. So it does appeal to folks who are into visually oriented topics. So you've got your general influencers, but you've got people who also are interested in fashion, travel, food, just photography in general, artists. You can also find a lot of young professionals here too. So some folks use Instagram in a more casual fashion of just documenting their everyday life or their hobbies, but some people make it kind of their own artistic professional platform where they network with other folks. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people do shopping through Instagram now. So if your association does have any merchandise that you're ever trying to sell to the general public or to your members, or if you have occasional events where you're trying to sell tickets to your fundraiser, tickets to your Christmas market or whatever it may be, consider working that into Instagram posts and see if you can get out the word that way. In terms of linking to websites, Instagram's a little funny with that. Most other website social media platforms, you can have a direct link within the post that will be hyperlinked. Instagram doesn't really play that way, but the key here is in the little bio that you create for your organization, you can have a link tree. And so you can create one of these really easy little link trees where if people click on the link in the bio, that's the magic key phrase you'll be using in your post when you want to direct people to your link tree. When they click on that link, they will be taken to like a little menu of all the different places that you want them to go to. So it might be like your organization's website, and then registration for an event, and maybe your online store as another link. So that is a good thing to know about. All right, LinkedIn. So this is kind of the professional network. It's actually been around a little earlier than Twitter, or not Twitter, Facebook even. It was founded in 2003. It is used by 25% of American adults. Demographics skew a little more heavily male, but still pretty even. And who might you find here? LinkedIn is a great place to look at what your industry peers are doing, either peer organizations or competitors. It's also a place to reach job searchers. If you ever have vacancies in your organization, LinkedIn is a great place to post about jobs and try and reach potential candidates. For posting on LinkedIn, you want to make sure you set up a business profile for your organization. And the content here, even though you want to probably orient it a little more professionally than some of the other social media platforms, there's all sorts of things you can talk about here. You can talk about upcoming events. You can talk about milestones your association has reached. You can post about new blogs on your website. You can even do things like sending messages to new followers, asking if they want to join your email list, or just to kind of give them an FYI that you've got an event coming up. All sorts of things you can do here. LinkedIn also has a group functionality, kind of like Facebook. So that's another great place to consider getting involved in, looking for relevant groups, either geographically or by interest, and seeing, if you can casually build relationships with people in there. Quick word about Google My Business. It was founded more recently in 2014, and it's kind of an outgrowth of Google Plus, if you remember that. It is basically the information that is displayed when people search for your organization. But beyond that, you can also post things like just general updates, deals if you're running deals on your merchandise or an upcoming event, just like you can on social media. So as an example, I Googled a nonprofit I knew of in Philadelphia, and this is what pops up when you see their search results. And then in terms of the posts, this is an example of what they will look like. So you'll see your kind of who, what, where, your sort of directory style above, and then you'll see like your most recent posts below, which is kind of nice. So people who are here are most likely going to be people who are Google searching for your organization, either directly using your organization name or indirectly using keywords. And you can also encourage your members and people who attend your events or affiliate with your organization to leave feedback. Google is a great place to get reviews. So, if you're looking to kind of get the word out about your organization, or kind of cement its, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess cement your authoritativeness in the field. Having 4 or 5-star Google reviews is a really great way to do that. So just a quick few thoughts on ads. This can certainly be its own presentation, so I don't want to get too far into it. But you might consider doing advertisements for specific campaigns, like if you want to grow followers, or for upcoming events if you want to really get out the word about a big fundraiser you're doing. In general, if you're just starting out and if you have a limited budget, you'll probably see better return on investment with doing Facebook, Instagram ads than with trying Google or LinkedIn. Just as an FYI, Facebook owns Instagram now. So when you create a Facebook ad, it basically runs on both platforms, which is kind of nice. It's sort of like a twofer. You can set your campaigns to run for specific periods of time, or you can manually turn them on and off as you need. This is just a resource that I found really interesting and helpful talking about Facebook ads. And the great thing about ads is also you can use audience targeting to try and really reach the specific groups that you're looking to reach. So there's all different approaches that you can do to this. You can be geo-targeted, location-based, like focusing on people just in your city or even just in your neighborhood. It could be interest-based, focusing on people who are in your field or industry, or people who are tangentially related. If you're a literacy organization, focusing on people who list reading as an interest. Demographics, you can focus in on specific age ranges or genders. With things like LinkedIn especially, you can focus in on education levels or specific fields of study. And also with LinkedIn in particular, you can focus in on people who work at specific companies or work in specific industries, or even who have a specific job title. So these are all really useful things if you're going to run an ad, to really spend your ad spend wisely, to really use it towards the folks you are trying to reach. And it's just a quick example. These are kind of what you would be looking for or looking at if you're targeting folks on these two platforms. So as you can see in Facebook, you can target by location, age, gender, language, and then all these different interests that people might list, including job titles. LinkedIn is very similar, with the addition functionality of being able to say, I want to look at people's with senior manager in their title, or that have marketing or media communications listed as their job fields. So these are all really good ways to focus in and make sure you're spending your dollars wisely. All right, so to the concept at hand, content calendars. So why use content calendar? Why not just kind of shoot off messages when you feel like it? Well, especially if you're working with others in your association to create and plan your content, it creates one organized central location for all your stuff, so that you're not accidentally posting on top of each other, which can happen. It gives you the opportunity to draft and proofread content before you finalize it, which is really nice, especially if you're working with a team. Having multiple eyes on a piece of content, you know, can help edit it into a really professional state. It helps your organization get into and stay in a posting rhythm. So by that I mean, if you decide you want to shoot for doing 2 posts a week for X number of months to see how that works for your organization, it helps you get into that rhythm to know, okay, I'm going to post on Monday and Thursday, and these are the posts I'm doing on this week. You can easily plan ahead for holidays, awareness months, cultural moments. So again, if your organization has to do with literacy, plan ahead for National Library Week. And then you can also look at the back end of your content calendar platform, if it has this capability to look at analytics and determine what posts and what kinds of posts and what times of day work best for posting for your organization. And what do you want to have in this content calendar? So some key elements will be the platform or platforms you want a piece of content to be posted to, the date and time you were planning to have that content be posted, the content itself. So the little blurb you want to accompany your post. And then often it's a great idea to include related videos or imagery. So it could be stock photos, but it could also be photos of your organization in action if it relates to the post, which is really nice. You know, anything that's visual and that will capture people's eyes, you know, instead of just glossing over it in the timeline. Also put here any links or hashtags you want to be included in your post. Links could be to your organization's website. It could be to a blog post that you just put up and are promoting. In terms of hashtags, it can be cultural or thematic hashtags like we discussed before, but most platforms also have the ability to tag individual people or organizations' accounts as well. So if you're doing a joint fundraiser with another group and you have their permission to tag them, it's a great way to get people following both you and following that other organization to see that post. And then any other relevant info to the post. So for example, if you're posting to Facebook, is this just gonna be a normal Facebook post? Or do you wanna do it as a Facebook story, which is kind of like an Instagram story, those little quick video things that you can scroll through. All right, so what sorts of tools can you use to plan your content? Probably one of the most basic ones and low commit ones would be Microsoft Office. Very likely that your organization is already using it, or even if you don't have a license specifically for your organization, your employees or volunteers probably have it already on their home computers. You can use track changes if you're using it offline and just sending documents back and forth with your collaborators. Or if you have a license for Office 365, You can collaborate online, which is really nice. There are mobile apps available. And I should point out that this is a planning only sort of situation. As far as I know, there isn't an app within Microsoft Office that will post the content for you, but it is a really great way for you to get organized. So here's just a little example of a quick and easy content calendar you can use within Microsoft Excel. You know, lay out the days of the week, lay out the different media you want to post to, and there's lots of different templates or approaches you can use for this. Kind of along the same lines, we've got Google Workspace. They recently rebranded the Workspace, but you might know it as Google Docs or Google Drive. So it's a very similar feel to Microsoft Office. So if you're already familiar with using Word and Excel, you can pretty easily transition to using Docs and Sheets, for example. You can use the shared Google account if you want to have one login for all of your organization stuff, or if everybody has their own individual Gmail login, you can easily share specific documents or folders of documents with other people in the online cloud, which is really nice. It's also nice that you can work in real time at the same time on the same document. And you know, if you're logged in and if your peers are logged in, you'll see, okay, Susie is typing this right now, just so you can kind of keep track of who's doing what. I personally actually find Google Documents approach to kind of the track changes a little more intuitive and less clunky than Microsoft's, just because it's to the point and there's not a whole lot of windows you have to go into to say, okay, accept these changes, don't accept these changes. It's just kind of does it right there in the document. There are options for nonprofits in terms of subscriptions. So I have the little box here that tells you sort of the basic elements that you can get for free for signing up for Google nonprofits, which is really nice. Again, this is just strictly a planning tool. You know, you'll have to schedule the posts on your own within the platform, but it does work really nice for planning, especially since it's all in the cloud. And so you can easily access it from your phone, your computer, your tablet, basically anything that has internet connectivity. Moving on to Airtable. So Airtable is also a planning only situation. It has kind of a different look and feel than the last two platforms. So it's nice to look at just as an alternative. If you're a more visually oriented person, I think the way that Airtable does its little icons for different bases is really eye-catching and really easy to see. Okay, this is a calendar versus this is a catalog book. There's a ton of different templates within Airtable you can use for planning, which is also nice. Here I have an example of one that we've used where you can have the post name. In the notes field, you can enter the text you want to accompany the post. And attachments, you can easily attach any images you want to include. And then you can have columns for, you know, when it was posted, when it was approved, if you have to get approval with other members of your team, things like that. Again, it's planning only, but I think it's a really nice option. And they do have free version of it that you can use to just try out if you're curious. So moving on to options that will actually post content for you. There are a ton of different options. I can't cover them all in one presentation, but I just want to cover a couple. Hootsuite is kind of the OG of the posting and planning apps. I actually used it about 10 years ago in my first marketing job. And of course, they've evolved since that. It's calendar and schedule in one. It's compatible with a whole slew of social networks. So, you know, even if you're on something beyond kind of the few I covered already, so YouTube, it'll be something that will be compatible and you can integrate into your Hootsuite. It's really nice for monitoring different channels in one place. So instead of having to look at the back ends of Twitter and then of Instagram and then of Facebook to see how your posts are performing or what you've got scheduled, you can see it all in one place, which is really helpful. It's also nice for social listening. And by that, I mean, if you want to see what people are saying about your organization specifically, or about important hashtags in your field. You can set up a Hootsuite to listen for you and then check periodically up, okay, this is what people are saying right now on social media, or even on different blog posts. It's also a nice way to delegate tasks and access. So with Hootsuite, you don't have to share one set of login credentials like you might if you're just doing individual posts to the different platforms where you all need to know the company login to Twitter. Once you connect all the apps to Hootsuite, it stays connected, and then you can just create individual Hootsuite accounts for your different team members. This kind of thing can be really nice if you're having volunteers help you. That way you don't have to worry about, whether they still have access to, your Twitter login or whatnot if they decide to stop volunteering with you. Some of the different levels also now include access to different stock photos and GIFs that you can use in your posts, which is really nice. There's a limited free tier, and it is pretty limited. It only lets you attach 2 social accounts to it, but it is a nice way to, again, test drive the tool to see if it will work for you. And they do offer some sort of discount for nonprofits, kind of like Google does, which is also nice. Loomly is a little bit of a newer player in this market, but it works really similar to how Hootsuite does. It does have a few extra bells and whistles at the more basic levels, which is nice. And I like the look of it. It's just a very clean, aesthetically appealing interface to work with. I find it kind of calming since there's so much white space. It's not as in your face as some other websites you might be working with on a daily basis. Nice thing about Loomly is one of the tools it has is it offers you post ideas. So if you know you got to get out a post this week and you just don't have anything in particular to promote, inspiration just is not striking you, look at what their post ideas is and see, okay, maybe we'll do like a little Wisdom Wednesday, little inspirational or advice quote. It doesn't have to always be like premium, high quality, really exciting content that you're posting. You mainly want people to stay engaged, and then to do that, you want to maintain kind of a regular posting schedule so they get used to seeing you in their timeline, and they, like you kind of build that trust of, okay, following this organization for a couple months now, they seem pretty cool. I'm going to start interacting with them. All right, moving on to some higher end options. These next couple are things that we use at iConnection, and I will, acknowledge upfront that it's not going to be in everybody's price range, but I at least want to let you guys know about these tools, just in case your organization ever grows to the point where you do want to look for something more robust. So SharpSpring considers itself an all-in-one growth platform. By that, it means it's not just social media, or it's not just an email blast software, or it's not just a customer relationship database software. It can do a bunch of different things in one place. And that's another thing to consider with some of these higher end software is that, yeah, it looks a little expensive at the base level, but if you can use it to do several different other things that otherwise you would have to be subscribing to MailChimp or other software to handle, you can do it all in one place. It's already all integrated with each other. That can be a nice thing. It doesn't have a free tier, but you can sign up for a 14-day demo. And sort of the sorts of things you can do with SharpSpring are, like I said, you can create and schedule email blasts. They actually have an ability to create forms, and you can create like a little landing page for the form if you want to have people sign up for an event, or if you're doing like some sort of membership drive where you want to capture that specific audience into its own segment in your contact list. This is a great way to do that too. They also have these really nice visual workflows you can set up so that, when somebody signs up for X mailing list, they automatically get put into Y list in your contacts. And I like the visual interface because it's really easy to see the steps that you're setting up. It's not this abstract thing. You can just see what's going to happen. It's also really nice to schedule multiple posts with the same content at once. So you can do this multi-post to, to all of your social media, to just Facebook, LinkedIn, lots of different ways you can set that up, which is nice, little time saver. HubSpot is really a robust tool and definitely on the higher end side of things in terms of both budget and functionality. You can actually build entire websites on HubSpot. We have one client, Champions Oncology, that has done this. So if you want an idea of what this platform is capable of, I invite you to look at their website and check it out. It's really a pretty nice website for being built on a sort of what you see is what you get platform. Has really robust analytics for both social media, email, basically any sort of analytics or reporting you want done. They do have a free tier that you can kind of check out and play around with if you're not ready to commit to an actual plan. And just to show you, I think this interface is really nice too. In their social media portion, you can look at a calendar view of your upcoming social media, and you can really easily see with these icons, okay, these are all going on all our platforms, these are just going to LinkedIn and Twitter, etc. And when you're creating content, you can also get a preview of what it's going to look like, which is also really nice. You can see, okay, I don't like the automatic picture that it's pulling for this blog post, so I'm going to change it out for a specific stock photo, a specific image from our organization's assets instead of what it's automatically showing. And I do want to point out also that even if HubSpot is not your jam, they have a really great set of trainings and kind of webinar videos and such in what they call their HubSpot Academy. And those are absolutely free for you to check out. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at what they've got, especially if you're, even if you're just getting into marketing, or if you've been doing marketing for a while, but kind of want to brush up on other aspects of the field. They've got a lot of great content there. And that is about all I have at the moment. If you have follow-up questions, of course, you're welcome to ask them now, or if you think of them later on. You can definitely reach me at my IQ email address. And I just wanted to make also a note of our next presentation that's coming up next month. It's kind of an outgrowth of what we just talked about today. Once you've done a campaign or have a month's worth of content under your belt, how do you evaluate how it's doing? So we're going to talk about some of these different analytics tools and how you can use them to step up your game, as it were. So thank you very much for listening to me talk for however long it's been. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them now.
Chrissy, I have a quick question.
Sure.
How can you determine which channels are best for your business to use, like what's working and what's not working?
That's a great question. So there are a couple different ways you can use this. One approach might be to look at some of your competitor organizations or peer organizations and see what platforms they're on, and kind of do a little detective work and see, okay, like they seem to be getting a lot of likes and shares on Facebook. Maybe Facebook is a good place to hang out for our field. Another way, if you're already using several platforms, is to, again, look at the analytics side of things, or do kind of, you can look at it on the front end too and see, well, we seem to be getting a lot of engagement on LinkedIn, but maybe not so much on Instagram. Maybe our field just isn't as visually oriented in terms of content. So doing that kind of analysis and surveying will give you an idea of what's doing better on different platforms, and that can both guide what platforms you really want to focus on, growing your audience, or if you really want to be active on the platforms that are not doing as well, gives you an idea of which platforms you should focus on in terms of maybe doing some extra training or some extra research to see, okay, these are the kinds of posts that do better on Instagram. Let's play around with mixing it up and trying content more like this to see if that makes a difference.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. So I was on a networking call, part of a networking group, virtual, and I was talking to a marketer actually in London, and he said in his social media hashtag strategy, he does some research and he picks a mix of competitive hashtags and less competitive. So my question is, where do you go to get that information? Like I wanted to research, yeah.
So there's a couple different approaches. There are third-party platforms like Hashtagify, I think I mentioned earlier, where you can go to these websites and they will tell you what's currently trending in general, but you can also use their search functionality kind of to drill down and see, okay, for National Libraries Week, if we want to be involved in that, what are the hashtags that people are using for this? But you can also do a little research within the different platforms themselves. I think Facebook, I think all of the big four, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, let you search by hashtags. So you can see what are the hashtags people are using for your field and which ones have the most or least volume. I know with Instagram specifically, if you go to their search functionality and look for a term like vintage or vintage thrift or whatever, it will tell you both the hashtag itself, and then underneath it'll give you an idea of the search volume so that you can see, okay, vintage alone as a keyword has a ton of volume. So it might be hard for us to make a dent in that. But if you look at some of the more specific or long tail hashtags and how you can use them to step up your game, as it were, for vintage, thrift, California, if that's where you're based or whatever, then you'll see lower traffic volume numbers, which might be easier for you to get seen. So your colleague that you talked with has a really good approach, I think, in terms of using some high volume keywords, just so you might reach different demographics that you're not currently reaching, and then some longer tail hashtags that will be more likely to be seen because, lower traffic, less likelihood of getting kind of lost in everything else.
Great.